When it comes to science, there's no taking back what's discovered. It's one of the greatest, most terrifying aspects of all. Experiments help humans learn valuable lessons, even if those experiments can get a bit crazy.
And the goal was to see if 8 people could live inside a closed system.
From the real-life Human Biosphere Project to a man living in sensory-depraved situations to better understand the body's natural rhythm. Here are 15 science experiments that went horribly wrong.
At a certain moment, you decide you are awake. It's curious because you are not sure.
Could this be a photo from one of Russia's most notorious mysteries? To understand the cruelty that these people underwent, you must first understand the story. The urban myth tells of Soviet-era scientists who formulated a stimulant that would enable soldiers to not require any sleep for up to 30 days. Russia, being Russia, decided to test their gas on 5 prisoners, promising them their freedom in exchange of the completion of the test. They locked the 5 prisoners in hermetically sealed chambers and started pumping in the gas and observing the reactions. Within days, the men started exhibiting the sort of paranoia and psychosis that you might expect from humans in a typical symptom deprivation situation. As more time went on, they started acting stranger. 15 days in, when scientists could barely see the men through the thick glass of the chamber, they filled the room with fresh air. There, they discovered that one of the men was dead, and the 4 surviving test subjects were all sporting horrendously violent injuries. One of the prisoners said they entered a state of evil and violence that lies dormant in humans thanks to sleep. What do you think of the tale? Is there something true there, or is it yet just another internet fabrication? Stanford Prison Experiment. In 1971, a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo and some colleagues embarked on a mission to create an experiment that observed the impact of becoming a prisoner or prison guard. It would eventually become known as the Stanford Prison Experiment. It's become one of the most well-known, controversial experiments in psychology's deep history. The goal was to determine whether physically and psychologically healthy people who knew they were participating in an experiment would change their behavior to accommodate the new lifestyle in the prison-like setting. Some participants were chosen as prisoners and others as guards. Prisoners were forced to stay on the premises for 24 hours a day, while the guards rotated in 3-man crews and 8-hour shifts where they were allowed to leave and return home. They wanted the prison settings to be as authentic as possible. While the experiment was originally slated to last 14 days, they were forced to close it after just 6 because the participants started acting strange. Guards became abusive, and the prisoners began to show signs of extreme stress and anxiety, and rightfully so. It showed that no matter the person, the type of system is bad for all involved. Biosphere 2. In the 90s, a group of hippies spent 2 years inside a sealed dome dubbed Biosphere 2. While it sounds amazing and something that might end up in a Hollywood film, they ended up starving and gasping for breath. The line between comedy and tragedy is often hard to perceive. The Biosphere 2 experiment ran from 1991 to 1993 and will always be remembered as a failure if it's remembered at all. It's already begun to fade into the back of human conscious. The pseudo-scientific experiment was doomed to fail. The fact there had to even be a Biosphere 1 before they realized that Biosphere 2 was a bad idea is tragic in itself. They turned a desert ranch into a self-sufficient homestead, planting trees, raising buildings, and making a home. The whole project was funded as a research experiment into off-world colonization. Heck, even the style for which they marketed the whole thing and sold the project was like a big, funded space mission. McDonald's every day. We all know fast food is bad for us. If not, surprise, haven't you seen the documentary Super Size Me? If not, the genius film allowed many to look at the food they eat and decide whether it was worth consuming. It might taste good, but diabetes is rampant, and the fast food industry was blamed for a big portion of it. All in all, it falls to the people putting it on their own bodies, but restaurants should have a responsibility to actually use food as well. The 2004 film is said to be the kickoff to the super health food revolution that would ensue, giving us products like gluten-free, lactose-free, natural sugar alternatives, and superfood bowls. One of the best things it did was to help improve human awareness of the importance of a healthy diet, and that nutrition was something much larger than just calories. The film joined a larger discussion about where our food actually comes from and how it's actually made, revealing a whole new set of problems that will come from the food industry. massive packaging plants, mixed products, you name it. Ever wonder why so many people didn't have gluten sensitivities? It's for reasons like this that they spread so fast. Giant corporations making anything from cereal to fish products were using the same equipment for both and contaminating it. Texas cave experiment. For 6 months, geologist Michel Seifer isolated himself in a cave, a daring attempt to study the body's natural rhythm without interference from the outside day and night cycle influence. That isn't to say that it's bad rhythm, but if humans didn't have the sun and the moon to tell time, how could they? It's this very question that he went there to solve. 440 feet from the entrance, with a sparse tent and little furniture, the geologist went about his work. The chamber was stocked with frozen food and nearly 800 gallons of water. Remember, this experiment isn't about whether he could survive the encounter, but rather what would happen when the body and mind had no way to tell time. By the end of month 1, he was living a 26-hour cycle, though he didn't know it at the time. Thanks to the lack of method of telling time, he would simply stay awake until he felt tired and went to bed. He let the researchers know when he was ready to sleep and the lights were turned off. He kept a record of his time in the cave, but his calculations were not accurate. Separated at birth. 3 boys were separated at birth by the adoption agency for an experiment that some are claiming is horrific. A Netflix documentary now covers their story, and it's one crazy tale. The adoptive parents, nor the kids, were ever informed about the existence of the other by design. Only when one of the boys went to college and some of the students already knew him did he really start to understand the gravity of the situation. When the two finally ended up meeting, they said it's like the world faded away and they instantly knew they were brothers. It's weird how there are some mystical forces out there that told them that. Either that or the fact they looked nearly identical. Soon, the third twin, who was studying in a New York college, got wind of the news and recognized his own face in theirs. He immediately contacted his brothers. Reporters were quick to mention they're coming out of the woodwork. Milgram experiment. Perhaps one of the most controversial experiments comes to us from a man named Stanley Milgram, who focused his efforts on the conflict between obedience to authority and personal conscience. To do this, he analyzed 1963 justifications for acts of genocide during World War II, most of them using the excuse of obedience as their main reason for their mistakes. That is, following orders without questioning the repercussion and acting upon them. The whole experiment was conducted to answer one question. Could Eichmann and his millions of accomplices in the horrors of the Holocaust be written off as just following orders? Could anyone actually call them all accomplices? To learn more, a secret actor was in place with a bunch of electrodes on his body. The participant would be behind a control panel with all sorts of different shock levels. The participant would be ordered to shock the participant even if that meant someone was getting hurt. However, the actor wasn't getting shocked at all. The real test was whether the people would continue with their orders after a specific set of orders or disobey. 65% took it to the max. All took it at least to 300 votes. Winthrop-Kellogg experiment. In 1931, radical comparative psychologist Winthrop Niles Kellogg and his spouse welcomed a new arrival to their home. While this type of sentence is typical preceded with news of new baby, this one comes to us in the form of a baby chimpanzee. They planned to raise the chimp, who they named Gua, alongside their own baby, Donald, in the exact same way to see what would happen. Could a chimp grow up to behave like a human, or even think it was human? Can a human grow up to think it's a chimp? The couple wasn't sure, but they also didn't care. They just had to have the burning questions answered. Sounds a bit like mad science. In addition to conducting a thorough list of experiments that included the likes of blood pressure, memory, body size, drawing, reflexes, depth perception, vocalization, locomotion, motor function, strength, dexterity, critical thinking, problem solving, and many more. Eventually, Gua hit a wall. There's no amount of training or nurturing that can overcome that she was genetically a chimpanzee. Dogbot meets real dogs. Years ago, researchers from Budapest and the Sony Computer Science Laboratory in Paris combined forces to try and learn whether dogs would accept Sony's new commercial dogbot, dubbed Aibo, as one of the pact. This vital piece of research would tell whether many people with pets already in their home would ever purchase one. The experiment results were found in a formal scientific publication, Social Behavior of Dogs Encountering Aibo. To put it simply, the answer is no. Dogs will not integrate the robot pet into the pack, no matter how hard they tried. They would never be able to trick a dog's nose from understanding what robot beast really is. You can use all the smells and pheromones all you want to convince them, but all the canines will smell is all that junk, plus the metal and wires of the robot. When it comes to sense of smell, dogs have one of the best on Earth. Mythbusters Cannonball. What happens when a show like Mythbusters, who conducts all sorts of wild experiments, goes wrong? Well, a cannonball might literally come bursting through your wall, as it did here. The cast and crew were on scene at the Alameda Sheriff Department's bomb range, where they were supervised by a trained bomb technician to conduct their experiments. According to a statement later released after the fact, the cannonball experiment took an unforeseen bounce from a safety berm and continued on a high velocity. Luckily, nobody was hurt. Sure, the team made all the proper precautions, but even one rogue cannonball flying through someone's home is too many, so it looks like it's back to the drawing board for this one. The studio has agreed to repair and pay for all the damages that accrued. Robber's Cave Experiment. Just when you thought the world couldn't get any stronger, you go and find out there's a real-life Lord of the Flies incident that can make your stomach flip. Psychologist Muzaffar Sharif brought together a group of boys at a U.S. summer camp and tried to force them to fight each other for sport and sometimes even survival. Sharif found a place at Harvard Study Psychology, but quickly found himself frustrated by the narrowness of the studies there, which mainly involved boring observation of lab rats. He was drawn to the emerging field of social psychology, which looks at the way human behavior is influenced by others. And the spark was lit, and the experiment was but a seed in his mind. In the aftermath of World War II, he had keen interest from other parties in the experiment. In 1953, the Rockefeller Foundation handed Sharif $38,000, about $350,000 when considering inflation, to carry out his supposed career-defining research. This time, no rats. The subjects were up to 11-year-olds, and neither they nor their parents had any idea what they were signing up for. Jejune Institute. Many people run away to the circus, others to San Francisco. To many of the residents that live there, it's one and the same. All sorts of new communities of people get together and start something new. Oftentimes, it explodes and a new pop sensation is born. Other times, it dies in just a few years and is never heard from again. The Jejune Institute is one such community that's on the back end of being phased out. Existing from 2008 to 2010, this group put on some of the city's greatest scavenger hunts ever assembled that would take participants through the financial district in Chinatown on an amazing tour of the city. There are tours of the city, and then there's experiencing the city, and the Jejune Institute made that happen on these initiation hunts. It was actually an AR game, alternate reality, created by an Oakland artist and was filled with made-up characters that helped flesh out their wild storylines. Reality and gaming is becoming increasingly entwined. Mouse Utopia. Over the last few hundred years, the human population of Earth has seen an increase, taking us from an estimated 1 billion in 1804 to nearly 9 billion in 2022. As the race continues to grow, the resources for which the Earth can produce are becoming scarcer, and it's drawing many concerns from scientists and nations around the globe. Could a widespread famine be looming? While many people claim nature will work its toll and mass deaths will quell the numbers, new technology has seen it possible to feed even more. That isn't to say humans should continue this path of growth, but at least the technology is there in place just in case. As the human race continues to use its resources, further hastening the climate crisis, this could all change. For now, take heart. Humans have always been able to produce more food than needed, even if they lack the will or stability to distribute it to who needs it. Bittersweet. The new ball. When the NBA switched from leather to microfiber composite, not all the players in the league were happy. The move to take a greener approach to the thousands of balls they order every single year, a new style ball was first introduced in 2006 and sent to every player in the league in the offseason to give them a chance to get used to the changes. Some players raved over the new ball and the good it was doing for the environment, and others were perturbed that their game had taken a slight impact for the change. Eventually, the NBA caved to the players' wishes and the many complaints about the new ball that started to form. They ditched the design only after a few months of production and replaced it with the traditional leather that it had always been. Bulletproof glass of the future. Imagine the surprise on Elon Musk's face when he tells one of his scientists to throw a metal ball at the Tesla truck's armored windows and the thing shatters in front of hundreds of reporters and tech reviewers. Yeah, not a good look for that T of engineers or Mr. Musk. Just after teasing the windows were bulletproof, capable of stopping a 9mm bullet, he ordered his assistant to throw the ball. To be fair, just a moment before the window test, another assistant was up there banging the sides of the truck with a sledgehammer, and it didn't leave a mark. You win some, you lose some. It isn't exactly clear whether Mr. Musk knew that the window would shatter or not, but his surprise sure tells a convincing story. He's been known to go about and troll his observers and fans, so who knows what's going on in that guy's head. He went on to explain to the many onlookers that in the lab they threw everything, including the kitchen sink, without breaking the things. The first moment they hit the stage, they break. Imagine that. He was reported saying they would fix the issue in post and that it's no concern for the progress of the highly anticipated truck variant. The truck is set to start at around $39,000, so they're within a reasonable range of fully electric vehicles.